Okay, so today we are going to discuss the monetary policy in India. First of all, we should know the concept. What is monetary policy? It refers to the policy of the central bank, which is basically the monetary authority, with regard to the use of monetary instruments under its control to achieve the goals specified in the Act. So this is the legal definition I am telling. This is what is mentioned in the RBI Act, and which has been amended in the year 2016. But in simplistic term, you can remember the monetary policy as the policy of the central bank or the monetary authority to achieve the goals assigned to it. Okay. So that is what is monetary policy. So policy of the monetary authority to achieve the goals specified for the monetary authority is basically the monetary policy. And because to achieve the goals, you have to use some instruments or the tools. That is why in the complete definition, we say that the monetary policy is the policy of the central bank with regard to the use of monetary instruments under its control to achieve the goals specified in the Act. And now it is the Reserve Bank of India which is vested with the responsibility of conducting the monetary policy. So if you look at the monetary policy of any other country, then it will be the central bank of that country. And so in Indian context, this is the Reserve Bank of India, which is in charge of the monetary policy. And Reserve Bank of India was established under the provision of the Reserve Bank of India Act 1934, and it came into being in 1935. We all know that, and basically all the functions of Reserve Bank are derived from this act, that is RBI Act 1934. Now, what are the goals of monetary policy in India? In fact, when we studied in our UG undergraduate level or postgraduate level, we used to study basically three objectives, the three stabilization functions. If you remember, I had told you quickly what are the stabilization functions of the monetary authority. What are the stabilization functions? Basically, there are three stabilization functions. One is to stabilize the output. Yes. Yeah, please ask. You are telling something. Is anyone asking something? No? Okay. Okay, if there are any issues, yeah, tell me. Yes.
Hello.
Yeah. Go ahead. Ask your question.
Sir, voice break होची.
Voice break होची.
आज्ञा.
Okay. एबे सुबुची clear.
ठीक होची.
Okay. मत लागुची अन्य माने कोन ठीक सुनि पारछन voice ना सुनि पारना.
सर voice clearly audible रहउची आपनकर.
Okay, मैं भी ताले राजेंद्र बोधे आपनकर voice माने connectivity issues अछि. ठीक है. So then let us continue.
Okay, sir. Okay.
I was discussing the goals of the monetary authority or the monetary policy. I was telling that when we were in the colleges, we were basically taught that monetary authority has basically three objectives, and those are basically the stabilization functions. And one is output stabilization, that is basically how to ensure that GDP is growing steadily without much fluctuation. And second one is stabilization of the price. So that means inflation should not fluctuate much. And then stabilization of the employment. That's what we are taught. Employment, output, and prices should also be stabilized by the monetary authority as well as the fiscal authority. But now this has been changed. Okay? And now if you see the objective of the monetary policy in India, then the primary objective is basically keeping the price stability basically to achieve the price stability while keeping in mind the objective of the growth. But the primary now objective is becoming the price stability. Growth objective is there, but it is secondary. They will only keep in eye the growth, but the main objective of monetary policy or the monetary authority is to maintain the price stability. And of course, you should remember that monetary authority cannot do something independently without taking into consideration the fiscal authority, and they have to always go hand in hand. Then only the effectiveness of monetary policy and fiscal policy will be the best, and it will be the highest. When the monetary authority takes any measure for achieving the price stability, it also has to look at the growth objective. And price stability is a necessary precondition to sustainable growth. So the core objective of monetary authority is now basically the inflation targeting. Okay? That you will see that inflation does not fluctuate much. That is the core objective of RBI. Now it will not really bother much about the employment. It will not bother much about the growth. But of course, some concern will be shown while controlling the price. But yeah, the main objective is basically the inflation targeting. Now I was telling that this narrowing of the function of the Reserve Bank happened in 2016, where the Reserve Bank of India Act was amended. You know that RBI derives its power from RBI Act 1934, and this was amended in 2016, where it was basically described that now the Reserve Bank of India should focus only on inflation, that is basically inflation targeting. And so this basically provides the statutory basis for the implementation of the flexible inflation targeting framework. Okay. And we will also discuss like what was the past scenario, now how this have changed. But now just remember that in 2016, now the act has been amended, and this provides a basically flexible inflation targeting framework to the Reserve Bank of India. And so inflation targeting, the target will be set by the Government of India in consultation with the Reserve Bank of India in every 5 years. So now in 2016, now it will continue for 5 years. When this amendment was done in 2016, they gave a target, and that target has been fixed for 5 years. But after 5 years, so that means 2021, by May, the target will be changed. And that will be changed looking at the economic conditions. When we talk about the economic conditions, we basically look at the growth rate, okay, and we look at the employment scenario. Okay, and so based on those indicators, the inflation targeting of the country will be changed. And also, of course, we look at the fiscal policy also, like how much money will be spent by the government of India, the finance ministry. So how much liquidity will be injected into the system by the fiscal authority. Then accordingly, the monetary authority can change the target. But of course, this is done by the government in consultation with the Reserve Bank. So they have to always go hand in hand. And then comes the inflation target that has been set, that is basically 4% of the consumer price index. We have discussed earlier that when we talk about the consumer price index, it is basically the retail price that we are referring to. And it includes the taxes. So consumer price index will be mostly a little higher than the wholesale price index. So now the target has been set at 4%. And from August 5, 2016 to March 31st, 2021, this is the target given by the Government of India in consultation with the Reserve Bank. But there is a range, that it's not that only you have to maintain that 4%. There is an upper tolerance limit and there is also a lower tolerance limit. That means it can go up or it can come down a little bit. So basically you can say that 4% plus and minus 2%. Okay, so that is basically the target that is set for the monetary authority, because you can go up to 6%, and if it goes down, then it can go up to 2%. But below 2% is also not acceptable. We have discussed probably in some other class that inflation cannot go below certain limit. Okay? Minimum level of inflation is important, and that is 2%, and highest level in India would be 6%. But remember, when you compare this rate of inflation with any other country, you will find a difference, because in other countries, particularly in the advanced countries, the inflation target would be much less. In fact, in advanced countries, if they go to this 4% level of inflation, that will be quite high for them. Why? Because in the developed countries, they struggle to achieve just 1% or 2% growth. So if their growth rate is only 2% or 1%, and if the price is increasing at 4%, then people are losing basically the value of money. Okay, that means income is growing at 2% and price is increasing at 4%. So there is a net loss of 2%. So in the advanced countries, 4% target inflation target would be much higher level. But in India, it is not, because we are recording a growth almost 6-7% and 8% sometimes. Although in the recent years, particularly after 2016, when we did this targeting, the growth rates have fallen, but still, our potential of growth remains much higher, and we can achieve 7-8% growth. So when the growth rate falls below that, we are becoming concerned about that. But anyway, remember here that our inflation target is 4 plus and minus 2%. That much fluctuation is accepted. And we are now, RBI will always look at the consumer price index, not the WPI. Now, what will constitute a failure? Now, the average inflation, under this circumstance, it will be said that RBI has failed in their duty, or say the monetary policy authority has failed in their duty, when the average inflation is more than the upper tolerance level of the inflation target for any 3 consecutive quarters. Similarly, if the average inflation is less than the lower tolerance level for any 3 consecutive quarters. So we can say that if the inflation exceeds 6% and that continues for more than 3 quarters, okay, then only we will say that RBI has failed, or the monetary policy authority has failed in controlling the inflation. Similarly, if the inflation goes below 2%, then also it will, and that continues for 3 consecutive quarters, then it will be called as a failure in the part of the monetary authority in controlling the inflation. So that upper tolerance limit and lower tolerance limit is 2%. So that means the inflation should fluctuate between 2 to 6%, and if it exceeds or falls below that range continuously for 3 quarters, then it will be considered as a failure. So no, you must be reading in newspaper that for some quarters, 1 or 2 quarters, the inflation level goes up even beyond 6%, because sometimes the inflation have also gone up 7%, particularly during this lockdown. But it will not be treated as a failure, because it is not continuing for 3 consecutive quarters. If it continues, then it will be treated as a failure of the monetary policy authority. Now, who is in charge of this monetary policy? It is not only the Reserve Bank governor who is in charge, or the officials of the Reserve Bank. Now, under the new act, that is the amendment that happened in 2016. Now, the Reserve Bank of India, the government of India has basically constituted a monetary policy committee, MPC, a monetary policy committee. Now, in monetary policy committee, there are 6 members, in which RBI governor is the ex officio chairperson, and then we have a deputy governor and deputy governor of Reserve Bank of India, who is in charge of the monetary policy division. If you remember, in monetary in the Reserve Bank, how many deputy governors are there? I think there are 3 deputy governors, and they are given different wings. One is the banking sector, another is the inflationary, the monetary policy division, and another is economic affairs. So they look at different aspects of the banking sector, and now the deputy governor, who is in charge of the monetary policy division, is an ex-officio member of this Monetary Policy Committee. Other than that, one more officer of the Reserve Bank of India who is to be nominated by the central board, basically by the Government of India, and he is also an ex-officio member. So there are 3 ex-officio members from the Reserve Bank of India who are part of this Monetary Policy Committee. Now, other than these 3 members from the inside, like in-house members, there are 3 outside members, and all these 3 members are economists. One is Professor Chetan Ghet, who is working in Indian Statistical Institute, Delhi, and then Pami Dua, who was a professor in the School of Economics, and Rabindra H. Dholakia, who is a professor at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. So there are 3 outsiders and there are 3 insiders, and 6 members are there. And remember here now that if there are 6 members, if they go for a voting, because in the Monetary Policy Committee, they can go for a voting because the members will have different opinion when they implement certain policy, whether they should adopt a contractionary policy or an expansionary policy. And in such a situation, there could be difference of opinion. And if that is the case, if the votes are equally divided and there is a tie, then it is the Reserve Bank of India governor who can exercise his veto power, and he can give extra vote. So that's how there could be actually unanimity among the members. So this is the Monetary Policy Committee, and the Monetary Policy Committee is in charge of the inflation targeting. Now that is the central function of the Reserve Bank of India. And now what is the tenure of the Monetary Policy Committee? Now the Monetary Policy Committee will work for 4 years, okay? And they will hold for a period of 4 years or until further orders, whichever is earlier. Government can, of course, dismantle this, but you know, since for the first this is happening, government has not intervened. But if government wants, they can. But usually there is a tradition that the Government of India does not want to intervene into the functions of the RBI. And if I remember correctly, now there are 3 members from Odisha who are in this Monetary Policy Committee, particularly from within the RBI. Deputy Governor Michael D. Patra and Shaktikant Asenu is there. But no, the other member is not from Odisha. There are 2 members in this Monetary Policy Committee. Okay, now tenure is 4 years, and the present Monetary Policy Committee was notified in September 2016. Now coming to the operationalization part of MPC, like how do they operationalize the monetary policy? Now, in the Reserve Bank of India, there is a monetary policy department. They basically assist the Reserve Bank and the Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, in formulating the Monetary Policy Committee. And views of key stakeholders in the economy and analytical work of the Reserve Bank contribute to the process for arriving at the decision on the policy repo rate. Basically, that now repo rate has become the crucial instrument in controlling the inflation, or in controlling or in adjusting the fluctuations in the money supply. So that's why this is mentioned. But remember that within RBI there is a monetary policy division. They basically do the data analysis, and policy is announced. They do a lot of economic analysis, like what is the money supply available in the system, what is the growth target that the Government of India has set, how much money is being spent by the union governments and state governments, and they look at the industrial sector, because if there is a demand in the all sectors, then the demand for credits will be higher. So they look at everything. They look at the capacity utilization in the industries, okay? And so all these analysis are done by the monetary policy division of the Reserve Bank of India, and they facilitate MPC in formulating the monetary policy. And also the Financial Markets Operation Department operationalizes the monetary policy, and mainly through the day-to-day liquidity management operation. So they take the decision, monetary policy division basically, or the MPC takes the decision, but its operationalization happens through the financial market operation department. Okay, basically, say when the repo rate is increased or decreased, now that has to be reflected in the bank's interest rates for the loans as well as the saving rates, and so that all these things are basically done by the financial market operation department of the Reserve Bank of India, and through their liquidity management operation. And Financial Markets Committee meets daily to review the liquidity conditions so as to ensure that operating target of the weighted average call money rate. Okay? And Basically it is the Financial Markets Committee. They look at the liquidity available in the system, and accordingly they operationalize the monetary policy. Now the instruments, these are the crucial things one should know, that okay, now we knew who is doing what is the target and how this is operationalized, but ultimately it is the instruments, those are crucial in implementing the monetary policy, and these are basically discussed in the media, and we are going to discuss all of that. Now the first instrument, and that is the mostly used instruments, are now the repo rate and the reverse repo rate. Now what is the repo rate? It is the interest rate at which the Reserve Bank provides overnight liquidity to banks against the collateral of government and other approved securities under the liquidity adjustment facility. So remember that it is basically, so the key words that we should remember is that it is the rate at which the Reserve Bank provides liquidity. Okay. So you are getting the liquidity from the Reserve Bank. Then the other one is the overnight. Okay. It is a very short term, very short term interest rate, and whenever there is an urgency and we are asking for overnight liquidity, then in that case the banks will have to give collateral. And what are the collaterals that the banks can use? It is the government and other approved securities. So all the banks, whenever they need extra liquidity, they can go to the Reserve Bank, and these are short term in nature, very short term in nature, overnight. And so Reserve Bank will give liquidity to the commercial banks, but then for that the commercial banks will have to give collateral to the government, and those are basically the government and approved securities that will be given to the RBI, and then the rate that is charged is basically the repo rate. And now coming to the reverse repo rate, it is just opposite. That when the banks have extra liquidity with them, now they can park the liquidity with the Reserve Bank. Now when they are parking the liquidity with the Reserve Bank will also give some interest to the commercial banks. And so it is basically the interest rate at which the Reserve Bank absorbs liquidity on an overnight basis from banks against the collateral or eligible government securities under the liquidity adjustment facility. So these are the crucial things, and if you are following the Reserve Bank of India's monetary policy announcements in the recent months, you must have noticed now the RBI has been reducing both these rates, reverse repo rate and repo rates, steadily. So how are these tools linked to the money supply and monetary, how this can be controlled, we should discuss. Now when the Reserve Bank reduces the repo rate, now what happens? So banks are able to borrow from the Reserve Bank at a lower rate of interest. Therefore, the banks will also have to charge a lower rate of interest from the public. When they are issuing loans to the people, usually when the repo rate is reduced, the loan rates are also, basically the rate of interest on the loans are reduced. You might have noticed now, if you have taken any housing loan or any personal loan or car loan, you must have noticed now all the loan, basically the interest rate on all the loans have gone down because the Reserve Bank has reduced the repo rate. Similarly, now coming to the reverse repo rate, now there is, okay, due to lockdown, the demand for credit has fallen drastically in India. Now, when the demand for credit falls, the commercial banks will be sitting with lot of liquidity, and when they are sitting with lot of liquidity, they cannot just hold the money with them. Rather, they will park this liquidity with the Reserve Bank. And when they put the money with the Reserve Bank, now Reserve Bank will have to give interest rate to the commercial banks, and as a result of which the burden of the Reserve Bank basically increases, because if so much of liquidity is coming to the Reserve Bank, which ideally should go to the public, then the borrowing, basically the cost or the burden of the Reserve Bank increases, and to reduce this burden, now the Reserve Bank is reducing the reverse repo rate. So by looking at the reverse repo rate, you can understand whether there is enough liquidity into the system or not. So in a normal situation, when you are trying to control the inflation, your policy basically, you will increase the repo rate, and when you are increasing the repo rate, naturally the reverse repo rate will also increase. Okay, so now we should discuss together all these things. Now, when we are talking about the monetary policy, and these are the instruments, there are a lot of other instruments that we are going to discuss. But since the repo rate and reverse repo rate are most used policy rates, we should actually focus on this for some time. Now, monetary policy could be of three types. Okay, basically that is called as monetary policy stance. And so the first one could be expansionary, second could be contractionary, and other could be neutral. Okay? Now, when you are having expansionary monetary policy stance, now what is the implication? That you want to increase the liquidity in the system. Okay? That is expansionary monetary policy. That means you want to basically promote growth. So when you are adopting expansionary monetary policy, your objective is basically to inject more liquidity into the system. And as a result of which, people can, when you are injecting more liquidity into the system, the interest rate will go down, okay, and then the demand for the loans will be higher. Okay. So that's how that is actually expansionary monetary policy. The economy will expand. There will be more demand for credit. There will be more investment, and there will be more output, and there will be more employment. Now, on the other hand, in case of contractionary monetary policy, now you want to reduce the money supply in the system. Now, how will you reduce the money supply? By increasing the interest rate, you can always reduce the money supply. When you are increasing the interest rate, now the cost of borrowing will increase, and people will not go to banks to borrow extra liquidity from the banks. So that's how when the cost of borrowing increases, the demand for credit will fall, and as a result of which the offtake of credit falls, the output production will fall, and then the employment will also fall. So that and then third one is neutral. That means the economy is going in a perfect situation. You do not need to do any kind of changes. So you just leave it as it is, unchanged. And now, how will you use this repo rate and reverse repo? Now, if we are increasing the repo rates, if we are increasing the repo rates, the banks will also charge higher rate of interest from the people. That means that is basically a sign of a contractionary monetary policy. And contractionary monetary policy is adopted to control the inflation. You believe that there is so much of liquidity into the system, so you need to absorb the liquidity, and that can be done by increasing the repo rate. So when RBI increases the repo rate, the burden is transferred to the commercial banks. The commercial banks will also transfer this burden to the people, and that's so the interest rate will go up, and that's so the money supply in the system will come. And reverse repo, as I told you that when there is enough liquidity in the system, the banks park the money with the Reserve Bank, and then the bank, the RBI basically feels that no, it is becoming too much burden on me, so the RBI reduces the reverse repo rate. Now, liquidity adjustment facility is basically it consists of overnight as well as term repo options. Term means basically long-term repo options, and this is basically a broader concept used where the entire operation, both repo rate and reverse repo, are involved. That's why you see when we define the repo rate and reverse repo rate, we are using the word liquidity adjustment facility. So that's why these are not mentioned in RBI website. What is the rate? When you look at the policy rates, there will be repo rate, there will be reverse repo rate, then there will be marginal standing facility rate. That is another important rate that we should know. What is marginal standing facility rate? It is a facility under which the scheduled commercial banks can borrow additional amount of overnight money from the Reserve Bank by dipping into their statutory liquidity ratio portfolio up to a limit at a penal rate of interest. This provides a safety valve against the unanticipated liquidity shocks to the banking system. So again, remember, marginal standing facility rate is introduced only very recently. Of course, when I say recently, it will be about 10-15 years. But before that, it did not exist. There was only repo, reverse repo, and then bank rate. But now this marginal standing facility has been introduced. Now, what is this? If you compare this with the repo rate, the difference is that, sorry, where did I go? Sorry. Oh, no. Okay, so when you compare this marginal standing facility rate with the repo rate, this one marginal standing facility rate is that you want to borrow additional amount of overnight money. So that means whatever you could borrow under the repo rate, that is not sufficient. You want to still borrow more liquidity because you need urgently liquidity. And in such a situation, you can use this marginal standing facility rate. So you can borrow additional amount of overnight money from the Reserve Bank. But how will you do that? You have to basically reduce the statutory liquidity ratio portfolio up to a limit. So basically, again, you are mortgaging. You had mortgaged this approved securities or the government securities to get extra liquidity under repo rate provision. Now, if you still need more, then you will have to again reduce the statutory liquidity portfolios, because remember, this is an investment. When I had told you also in the past that statutory liquidity ratio is basically a sort of investment, because you have put your money with the government treasury bills, so you are getting rate of interest. But if you need extra liquidity, then you will have to reduce this. That means you are giving this much to the Reserve Bank as extra mortgage or collateral, and you are getting extra liquidity from the Reserve Bank, and the interest rate of the interest rate charged under this monetary marginal standing facility rate is always higher than the repo rate. Okay? And why? Because you need extra liquidity. So for that you have to give a penal rate of interest. Okay? That's how marginal standing facility rate is a little higher than the repo rate. And then corridor again, this is not a rate but just a concept, but that is never used in the public domain. So it is the marginal facility rate and the reverse repo rate determine the corridor facility. So both these rates determine the corridor facility, determine the corridor for the daily movement. But okay, so you don't have to understand this much, because this is not a rate as such that is used in day-to-day life. But bank rate is important. Now, what is bank rate? Now, it is the rate at which the Reserve Bank is ready to buy or rediscount bills of exchange or other commercial papers. And the bank rate is published under the Section 49 of the Reserve Bank Act. And this rate has been now aligned with the marginal standing facility rate. Therefore, both are changing automatically when the MSF marginal standing facility rate changes alongside the policy repo rate changes. Okay. Now you must be getting confused with the three rates. One is the bank rate, and usually that happens, this confusion. One is the bank rate, other is the repo rate, and other is the marginal standing facility rate. So these are all the okay, when you say bank rate or marginal standing facility rate or repo rate, these are the interest rate charged by the Reserve Bank when it gives liquidity to the commercial banks. But then why there are three different rates? Because the bank rate is basically the rate at which the commercial banks get liquidity from the Reserve Bank for a relatively longer term borrowing. Okay. So you are getting liquidity which is relatively long term in nature. But how long is that long term? It is actually only it would be maximum 13 weeks, okay, or 14 weeks, not more than that. So that is the long term borrowing that commercial banks will be doing from the Reserve Bank. And so that is long term. And then for short term, there is overnight liquidity. It is the repo rate that is charged. So it is interest rate charged by the RBI when you are getting liquidity from the RBI. Okay. And but of course, in everything, in every case, you will have to give the collateral, and those are basically the government or approved securities. And marginal standing facility, if you are not able to get enough liquidity under the bank rate or under the repo rate, still you need more liquidity, then you will have to again borrow using that, basically reducing the statutory liquidity portfolio and at a higher rate of interest, basically at a penal rate of interest, and that is what is marginal standing facility rate. And so these are the three. So when you say the policy rates, how many policy rates we use? One is repo rate, other is the reverse repo rate, then third one is the marginal standing facility rate, and other is the bank rate. So there are basically we can say 4 policy rates. Those are used to control the inflation. And I told you that whenever the Reserve Bank adopts an expansionary monetary policy, it will reduce all the policy rates. Now, when it wants to adopt a contractionary monetary policy, it will increase all the policy rates: bank rate, marginal standing facility rate, and the repo rate. Now, other than the policy rates, there are reserve ratios. Those are also used by the monetary authority to control or to observe the liquidity. And yes.
So could you explain the corridor in simple language?
Which one?
Corridor.
Corridor. Okay. Corridor is basically the marginal standing facility rate and the reverse repo rate determine the corridor for daily movement in the weighted average call money rate. In fact, as I told you that as such, no, we don't use corridor as a rate. Okay? But like I told you that this liquidity the liquidity adjustment facility and the corridors, these are basically for the operationalization part. But these are not the rates that directly affect the banking system. These are basically 2 concepts. Those are used for the operationalization part of the monetary policy, and that's why probably never hear about the corridor or liquidity adjustment facility in any debate and discussions. And that's why they are saying that when these 2 are defining the corridor, but then how those are not very clear. Okay, is that fine?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. No, I will check if something else is there, but I do not find anything extra on this calendar, like how they use
So
this
the
calendar.
call money is for 15 days.
Call money?
It's for 15 days or means the
Call.
bank.
I don't know actually. Call money rate is for 15 days. That I do not know. I do not know.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
But I told you that the instruments under the policy rates, we use the bank rate, we use the margin outstanding facility rate, we use the repo rate and the reverse repo rate. And these are the liquid adjustment facility and corridors are basically the concept. Those are used in the operationalization of the monetary policy. Then comes the reserve ratio, and we have two reserve ratios. One is cash reserve ratio, and other is the statutory liquidity ratio. Now, what is cash reserve ratio? That we have already discussed, but again repeating, it is the average daily balance that a bank is required to maintain with the Reserve Bank as a share of such percent of the net demand and time liabilities, basically the saving deposits and the fixed deposits that the Reserve Bank may notify from time to time. So, in simple terms, how do we remember this cash reserve ratio? It is a percentage of all the deposits that you are having, and that has to be deposited with the Reserve Bank. Okay, so, it is the average daily balance that a bank is required to maintain with the Reserve Bank, and this is calculated as a percentage of the net demand and time liabilities, which is basically all the saving deposits as well as the fixed deposits. So you calculate a percentage of this, and that is now at 4% that we have discussed. And then you have statutory liquidity ratio. The statutory liquidity ratio is the share of the net demand and time liabilities that a bank is required to maintain in safe and liquid assets such as unencumbered government securities, cash and gold. Okay. So mostly these are kept in the form of government securities and some part also in cash and gold. Cash will not give you any return, but gold prices may go up, so you may get return. That is a maximum part of this SLR is kept in the form of government securities. So look at the difference between CRR and SLR. So in CRR, you are just keeping the money with the Reserve Bank as a part of, as a percentage of the your saving and fixed deposits. But in case of statutory liquidity ratio, you are keeping this money with the Reserve Bank, but in terms of the assets such as government securities, cash and gold. And so now how these two instruments will be used to control the money supply? Now, if you increase the cash reserve ratio and statutory liquidity ratio, then your credit creation capacity increases. See, the second part is basically why this may also affect the investment or credit creation capacity, because this money is not going to the market. This money goes to the government. Okay, statutory liquidity ratio, since you are buying the government securities, definitely the money is good.
Hello, sir. Sorry to interrupt. So actually, I have a small doubt regarding this liquidity word. So why this liquidity word is mostly used in this case, in banking cases? Like all things are liquid. Means if you think short-term things like cash and gold and long-term things like debentures, fund, bonds and securities, all are liquid. So why this liquidity word particularly used? I have some doubt.
Liquidity, when you use the word liquidity, basically we refer to the money that is available with us or in the banking system. But yeah, basically when we talk about the liquidity word, we refer to the money supply that is available. And I had probably discussed this, that the liquidity, the degree of liquidity differs. Where some assets are more liquid compared to the other, and that's how some assets are more liquid, some assets are less liquid. But in total, everything will be included when we estimate the liquidity available in the system. Is that clear?
Sir, actually, more doubt है कि मतलब liquidity word कहाँ use करा जाता है?
Liquidity word use करा जाଉଛି ଆମେ ତାକୁ ସାଧାରଣ ଆମେ ଭାବୁଛେ ଯେ କେତେ money supply available ଅଛି, ଯେ ଆମେ କହୁଛେ the bank do not have much liquidity with them. Basically, they do not have cash. Okay, and you are not really telling cash because you don't have to give cash to anybody. You can use a check. You can do online transfer. When you are issuing a check against somebody, you are not really giving cash. It is only a transfer that is happening only in accounting sense. Okay? Cash is never transferred to anybody. So that is why liquidity is used, and liquidity does not mean only cash. It refers to all the financial assets that can be kept in the banking system, or that is available in the banking system. And since even the government securities will be considered in the part of liquidity, because you can use these government securities to mortgage, basically as a collateral to borrow something. So basically, since government securities are helping you to get some money from some other source, then this is basically helping you to get extra money, and that's how it is also a part of the liquidity. And so in simple term, you can say that whenever we are using the word liquidity, it refers to the money, and the money could be high powered money or it could be near money. High powered money is the currency, and near money is it is the other form of money. It could be deposit, time deposit, it could be fixed deposit, or it could be a check, it could be demand draft in any form. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So these are the rates. These are the reserve ratios, and when government wants to increase the money supply, it can reduce the cash reserve ratio. When you reduce the cash reserve ratio, as we have discussed, your multiple credit creation capacity increases. Okay? And because now it is 4, so your money multiplier, credit multiplier will be 1 by 4, and that is basically no, sorry, it is now 3, right? 0. Sorry, it is 3%, and if it wants to reduce further, say to 2, then the multiplier will be 50. Okay, and because 1 divided by 2 would be 0.5, so the multiplier would be basically. Am I telling it correct? No. When your CRR is 2, that means 2%, and that means it is 0.02, and so the multiplier will be 1 divided by 0.02, so that is equal to 50, right? Yeah, so 50 times your multiplier will increase. But at present our CRR is 3, so the multiplier is 0, so multiplier is 33. Okay? And yeah, so when you are reducing the cash reserve ratio, your credit multiplier basically increases, and also that will add more liquidity into the system. But I had told you also that in the past, our cash reserve ratio was as high as 20%, and that was a very inefficient banking system we had in the past because of the operational inefficiency. And government also used to have this much of cash reserve ratio because people had more preference for the liquidity. People wanted to hold cash with them, not deposit with the banks. That's how people used to go to bank to withdraw cash. But nowadays, you are happy with the cash that is available with the bank. You are using ATM, and when you are transferring money, you are doing online transfer. Now also, Government of India has put a limit that if you are giving cash to somebody, this cannot exceed a particular limit. So nowadays, people are not using cash. That is why Reserve Bank, so the commercial banks need not hold more amount of cash to meet their day-to-day transactions. So if you are reducing the cash reserve ratio, and remember it has gone down from 20% to 3%. Similarly, statutory liquidity ratio have also gone down. In the past, the statutory liquidity ratio was as high as 40%. That means Government of India used to take away 40% of the money that was available with the banking system. Okay? And because the government could not borrow from any other source, neither from World Bank nor from open market. But nowadays, since the SLR, nowadays the government can borrow from many other sources, and also the statutory liquidity ratio have gone down from 40% to 21%, and now I think it is less than 20%. So these two rates actually are affecting the in the past they affected the profit of the bank also. But remember, even though the statutory liquidity ratio have been now reduced by the government of India, by the Reserve Bank, most of the banks hold more liquidity, more they put their money in the government securities more than the statutory liquidity ratio. So, and why they do that? Because it is the safest asset banks can hold. See, what will the banks do? Banks will basically give loan to the other people, or they can invest in the country or in the external market. But there is a risk involved. Suppose they give a loan to people like Vijay Mallya and they don't repay, then the banks will be in trouble. But if they put the money in the government treasuries or government securities, then they can get a return, and that is safe. So even though SLR is falling steadily, banks are not reducing their deposit with the government security. Rather, this is still remaining at a very high level. Now, other operation is basically open market operation, through which basically you are doing outright purchase or sale of the government securities. Yes, if there is extra liquidity in the system, how will you observe that? You just sell more government securities so that the liquidity comes to you. Similarly, when there is a need to inject more liquidity, you have to what do you do? Okay, you are buying the liquidity, you are buying the government securities so that the liquidity is available in the system. So purchase or sell. When you are buying the government securities, you are giving cash to the people. RBI is holding the papers, and so there is more liquidity in the system. Now, when you want to observe that, you sell these government securities. So the paper is moving to the people, and currency is coming to the Reserve Bank. So that's how the open market operation is used to control the liquidity in the system. And then we have market stabilization scheme. This is introduced again in 2004, where the surplus liquidity of a more enduring nature arising from large capital inflows is observed through sale of short-dated government securities and treasury bills. And so the cash is mobilized, held in a separate government account with the Reserve Bank. So it is a little different from the open market operation, but it is more like that only, because you are selling the government securities, but you are observing the large capital inflows. Okay, so probably when it happens through, say, when the foreign companies are investing in our system, in our country, and if there is more capital coming into our system, then that may cause a panic, and that may cause a highly volatile market. So that can be observed through this market stabilization scheme. But it is more or less like the open market operation, if you look at the nature of the market stabilization scheme. But only that, under market stabilization scheme, you are observing the large capital inflows through the sale of short-dated government securities and treasury bills. That is the only difference between this OMO and MSS. Okay, now we knew what is happening in the present, particularly after 2016 when RBI Act was amended. But before that, the RBI had a different monetary policy regime altogether. There was no monetary policy committee. It was the only RBI governor and RBI department. They used to handle the inflation. So this was basically governed by an agreement on the monetary policy framework between the government and the Reserve Bank of India. That has happened in 2015. But before that, the Technical Advisory Committee on the Monetary Policy, with experts from monetary economics, central banking, financial market, and public finance, they used to basically advise the Reserve Bank. Okay. So prior to this monetary policy committee, although we did not have a monetary policy committee, but they used to have technical advisory committee. In fact, most of the people are economists, so they used to go to Bombay and they used to have meeting, and they would decide what should be the monetary policy stance and so that was only advisory in nature. But remember now, all the member of monetary policy have equal voting power. It is not merely advisory power of the experts; they are equal part of the decision making. And so this was only before this 2016 amendment. It was the expert committee used to basically give only advisory, and with the formation of MPC, this technical advisory committee now does not exist anymore. Now there is more transparency in the system in monetary policy making, and because now monetary policy committee is required to meet at least 4 times in a year. So they have to meet very frequently and see that the price volatility is reduced. So that means in every quarter at least they have to meet once. And in every meeting a quorum has to be maintained. Out of 6, minimum 4 people have to be present. That means at least 3 people can be from within RBI and only 1 person can be from outside. So but quorum has to be maintained, and that requires 4 members. And I have told already that each member of the MPC has 1 vote, and in the event of equality of votes, the governor has a second or a second or casting vote. And so the reserve now, okay, on every 14th day, after this, once they meet to decide on the stance of the monetary policy committee, and on the 14th day, the minute of the proceeding of the MPC are published on the website, and so that includes the resolution adopted by the MPC. Earlier, no, that was not the system. So now we can read what was debated and discussed. So sometimes people can basically give a dissent note. So you can see actually in the past it has also happened that within MPC there could be a difference of opinion and somebody can give a dissent note. So that's how the resolution has to be now put in the website, and the vote who actually gave vote for which stance, that has to also be made public, and then the statement of each member on the resolution adopted, that also has to be that needs to be published on the website. And once in every 6 months, RBI is required to publish a document called Monetary Policy Report to explain the sources of inflation and the forecast of inflation for at least 6 to 8 months. But sometimes this can go all wrong, like if you see the forecast that had happened just before the lockdown, we had a very different growth scenario and inflation, but now this has completely changed because this is an unexpected scenario. Similarly, globally also there could be a different scenario and that can really change the entire forecast, but they have to give some forecast so that investors get some idea, like, okay, what would be the expectation on inflation. Yeah. So this is all about the monetary policy in India, and we know that after the RBI Act 1934, which has been amended in 2016, a lot of changes have happened in our country. So with this we conclude